Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Brody Carter. Today, Israel striking back, launching powerful strikes against the Houthi rebels in Yemen after a dangerous missile attack against Ben Gurion Airport. And Israel is gearing up for its major assault against Hamas in Gaza, calling up tens of thousands of reservists. As a former Israeli intelligence officer tells CBN News, the real threat to Israel is coming from Iran. Most Americans believe the United States is the world's dominant nuclear power. But the facts tell a very different story. We'll bring you a closer look at the shrinking U.S. nuclear arsenal. And the crisis in higher education, why many of America's top Ivy League universities have had their reputations tarnished from plagiarism, antisemitism, and more. Those stories and more.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin in the Middle East, where Israel began bombing multiple sites in Yemen on Monday evening, a day after a Houthi missile attack hit near Israel's main airport. And Israel is calling up reserves for its major assault in Gaza. But Israel says it's not planning to rule that area. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us that story from Jerusalem.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made good on his promise to hit back at the Houthis for launching surface-to-surface missiles and drones toward Israel and its civilians. After a missile landed close to its main airport on Sunday, Israel's Air Force sent about 20 fighter jets to strike Houthi targets along Yemen's coast. The IDF said it struck the Hodeidah port, where Iranian weapons and military equipment that supply the Houthi regime are shipped into the country. Another target, the Bajil concrete plant, which is a source of income for the Houthis and is also used to build terrorist infrastructure. The increased pressure on the Houthis comes as Israel is calling up tens of thousands of reservists to carry out expanded operations against Hamas in Gaza. In a video posted on X, Netanyahu said Israel's goal is the defeat of Hamas and return of the hostages.
One thing will be clear. There will be no in and out. We'll call up reserves to come, hold territory. We're not going to enter and then exit the area only to carry out raids afterwards. That's not the plan. The intention is the opposite.
He also said Israel would create safe areas where Gaza's civilians will be relocated to the south.
There will be a movement of the population to protect them.
Meanwhile, analysts say the root cause still needs to be addressed. Oded Elam, former director of counterterrorism in the Mossad, told CBN News the real problem is not Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis, but their backers in Tehran.
Iran is the composer of whatever we see here. Although they do not take credit for any kind of attack that is initiated by proxies and like Hezbollah or like the Houthis or the Hamas and so on, but they are the big brother who actually hold the strings, and everybody's playing like a marionette to the theme and to the music.
He pointed out that Iran's greatest threat isn't just its pursuit of nuclear weapons.
And so the major threat to Israel is Iran. And I'm not just talking about the nuclear program, which is everybody knows about it, but I'm talking about initiating terror acts around the world against Jewish and Israeli targets all the time.
In Washington, hundreds of Christian and Jewish advocates gathered for Israel Advocacy Day, rallying lawmakers and citizens to stand firm for Israel and against anti-Semitism. That's more urgent than ever, as polling shows some 53% of Americans holding a negative view of Israel, with the numbers highest among young Americans.
Well, we have got to educate, educate, educate. So we need to be on social media, much more aggressive, reaching those young people where they are.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, joining us now from Jerusalem is CBN's Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, joining us now live from Jerusalem. Chris, we'll be getting back to Israel and the U.S. in just a moment. Sure. I do want to ask you about the damage striking back Israel. How much damage did these strikes impose on the Houthis?
Well, pretty impressive, Brody, when you see the footage coming out of Yemen right now. They hit critical military infrastructure, that belong to the Houthis. Israel hasn't officially confirmed all the targets, but they hit missile launch sites, weapon storage facilities, and then drone and command centers near the cities of Sanya and Houthi. So it really remains to be seen. They were strategic strikes. They were certainly aimed at retaliation. They couldn't let the attack on Israel's main airport go without responding to it. But they're also trying to degrade the Houthis' ability to launch long-range missiles. So it's too early to assess the full impact. But it remains to be seen. The U.S. has been launching an air campaign for several weeks now. Israel has struck the Yemen before, but we'll see. Remains to be seen if they have the capability to continue to fire these long-range ballistic missiles. Many of them have been hidden in underground bunkers throughout Yemen and on mobile launches. But we'll see what happens after this attack by Israel last night.
Yeah, Chris, a lot taking shape over there in the Middle East. In addition to the strikes in Yemen and Gaza on Monday, Israel also carrying out attacks in Syria and Lebanon. Is this an example of Israel fighting wars on multiple fronts?
Yeah, it's a seven-front war, Brody, and the immediate neighborhood, you have Hezbollah still, Israel still attacking Hezbollah sites in southern Lebanon, in the Beqar Valley. They continue to, even Beirut. So that's one of the fronts. Syria is another front. There's a new regime there, and they're also attacking, sites, military sites within Syria against this new regime, and also protecting the Druze population inside Syria. That's it's a priority for Israel. They want to protect the neighbors, the Druze neighbors, because there's a large minority here in Israel, and so they want to protect them. And then there's Yemen. The big question has to be seen, Brody, is Iran next? And will there be a direct attack on Iran with the nuclear talks going on between the U.S. And Iran? They seem to be on pause right now. But that's the major question facing Israel and the entire region right now. Is Israel going to strike Iran and its nuclear sites?
Well, Chris, Israel's new operation to take over Gaza, it's called Gideon's Chariots. What are its goals?
Well, they're pretty unambiguous. They want to defeat Hamas's remaining military and free all the remaining hostages. It really represents a big shift from the previous strategy, which was based on special operations. They would go in, clear an area, and then leave. And that's why some troops over the past year and a half have actually captured some areas multiple times. And that's why Netanyahu said in Julie's report, there's no more coming and going. They're going to take land and they're going to hold it. And that's the new strategy going on from here. And it's a big, big change in the strategy for Israel.
Well, Israel's changing how humanitarian aid is distributed in Gaza. What are the changes? Why is Israel going to do things differently now?
Well, the changes are because Hamas has for years, or since October 7th, been stealing the aid that's been going in. And what Israel wants to do is prevent Hamas from stealing that aid, selling it, and using it to fuel its war machine against Israel. So they're creating these humanitarian areas where people designated can come and get food for their family. It would be protected, run by U.S. Not tourists, but U.S. operations that had been hired, but also Israel would be securing that. So it's a very big change. They want to make sure that the people in Gaza, the population, is protected and supplied with necessary food and water, but they want to keep Hamas away from stealing the aid and using it for their own purposes.
Well, Chris, with some big poll changes showing a negative view of Israel in the U.S., that's quite a change. Is there a concern that negative coverage of Israel by the major media has influenced views of Israel in the U.S. and other countries?
It's a huge concern, and that's why Susan Michaels said what she said in Julie's report. It's so important to educate, especially the young people from the bias in the media. We've discussed the bias in the BBC, for example, recently when Israel's deputy foreign minister said that 80 times have had to correct stories. So people are not getting, especially the youth, not getting the complete story, but a big concern here in Israel, especially among the younger generations.
Well, can you tell us what's coming up on Jerusalem Dateline this week?
Well, we have update stories. We also have an interview with Danny Danon. He's Israel's UN ambassador. We also have analysis from retired General Amir Avivi. He's talking about, the strategy behind these changes in Israel's approach in Hamas and in the region. We also have an interview with Cindy Jacobs. She's talking about the concern and the alarm there is for U.S. sleeper cells in the U.S. And finally, a story on counting the Omer. That's done between Passover and Pentecost, and hopefully an outpouring of the Holy Spirit.
Excellent. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, thank you for your insights. We'll certainly look forward to what's coming on Jerusalem Dateline. You can catch Jerusalem Dateline. It's going to be happening at 8 p.m. Eastern on the CBN News channel. You can also watch on the CBN News app or on YouTube. Still ahead, as Israel's going to war, many Americans believe the U.S. is the world's dominant nuclear power. But the truth, that's very different. We'll bring you a look at America's shrinking nuclear arsenal when we come back. Many Americans assume that the United States is the world's unrivaled nuclear power. But in reality, America's nuclear stockpile has shrunk significantly, and many of the weapons it still has are outdated. Dale Hurt has this story.
Since the end of the Cold War, the United States has dramatically reduced the number of nuclear weapons it has deployed or in storage. That arsenal today is roughly 90% smaller than at the height of the nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union. America's nuclear stockpile has fallen to levels not seen since the 1960s, while China has embarked on an unprecedented nuclear buildup. The U.S. only has about 1,700 deployed nuclear warheads, and the newest is over 35 years old. In Asia, since the 1960s, the U.S. has withdrawn its nuclear weapons from Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. If war were to break out over Taiwan, experts fear our base in Guam could be neutralized in a Chinese first strike, and the U.S. would not be able to respond in kind.
All of this requires urgent action.
Frank Gaffney, the host of Securing America, served as Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration, when a strategy of peace through strength and a nuclear arms buildup helped defeat the Soviet Union.
All of that has essentially gone over the side. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see that we are hoping that nobody notices that we haven't done a whole lot with our nuclear deterrent since I left the Pentagon.
China, meanwhile, has taken a different course, tripling the size of its nuclear arsenal in just 5 years. It's now the planet's fastest-growing nuclear power.
I think that they are increasing the size of their nuclear arsenal because they want to use it to coerce others into standing down.
China expert Gordon Chang believes Beijing learned a lesson from the way Vladimir Putin used the threat of nuclear war to deter the West from more direct involvement in Ukraine.
The Chinese saw that this actually works. I think that they will precede any invasion of Taiwan, Japan, whatever, with threats to use their nuclear weapons to get the U.S. not to come to the aid of its friends and partners.
The U.S. military does have new nuclear weapons systems under development. But having dealt with the Soviets, Gaffney thinks China has even more nuclear weapons than the world thinks it has, some stored in its western desert.
They never bought this idea that Ronald Reagan, my old and much revered boss, famously said, which is a nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. They believe nuclear war is something that can be used decisively.
To counter China, some defense experts believe the U.S. would need to return at least some nuclear weapons to bases in Asia. And the South Koreans in a poll have already said they would welcome that. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Still ahead, remember the former Harvard president who was accused of plagiarism? We'll meet the author whose work she allegedly stole. And hear what she has to say about why it happened right after this. Ivy League universities were once considered shining examples of academic integrity and excellence. Today, some of those reputations are tarnished. Dr. Carol Swain is an author and former Ivy League professor, sitting down with CBN's Wendy Griffith to talk about the crisis in higher education.
Retired Professor Dr. Carol Swain, who taught at Princeton, Duke, and Vanderbilt, worries about the future of higher education in America.
I would say today that the ideas associated with Marxism and socialism have seeped into every sector of the university.
On this cold night in Nashville, Swain spoke to the Vanderbilt GOP Club about her new book, The Gay Affair, Harvard, Plagiarism, and the Death of Academic Integrity. She began, though, by telling them about her humble upbringing and why the American dream is possible for anyone who puts in the work.
I was one of 12 children, born and raised in rural poverty in southwestern Virginia. We all dropped out of school after completing the 8th grade. I married at age 16, had my first child at age 17, and in my early 20s, I earned a GED, went to a community college and got the first of 5 degrees. I graduated magna cum laude from Roanoke College while working 40 hours a week, nights and weekends at the community college library. And then I went to Virginia Tech, got a master's in political science, later a PhD in political science. And after I had been a professor at Princeton, tenured, I went back to school and got a law degree from Yale.
A prolific author, Swain's most famous work, Black Faces, Black Interests, asked the question, how well does the U.S. Congress represent African American interests? And it was from this book that former Harvard President Claudine Gay is accused of plagiarizing.
How did that make you feel?
I went through a range of emotions. Maybe, she just accidentally did that, but then I started reading her work and looking for citations and references to my work, and I became disturbed and then very sad because we're both Black women, and I thought it was a bad look for Black women.
On January 2nd, 2024, after only 186 days on the job, Claudine Gay, Harvard's first Black female president, announced her resignation. Swain partially blames DEI policies for Gay's fall.
They fast-tracked her, and so that's part of the problem, but she gave disastrous testimony before Congress, along with 2 other university presidents, about antisemitism on campus. And so of the 3, Claudine Gay stood out because she was not willing to really articulate a moral, sensitive policy to the harassment of Jewish students.
You say what happens at Harvard affects the entire world. What do you mean by that?
Everyone wants to be Harvard. If Harvard is lax about its academic integrity and standards, not only will it impact the other institutions, but also K through 12 education. Because the private and public schools, everyone's looking to Harvard for leadership. That's one reason I believe our country is in decline, because the Ivy League institutions, for the most part, are being controlled by people that have clear Marxist leaning as far as their ideology.
Another problem, according to Swain, the often double standard that exists between students and faculty.
Harvard, in most institutions, they have strict penalties and guidelines for students when it comes to plagiarism. But if it's an administrator or a faculty member, they kind of back away. If institutions are not willing to police the plagiarism, then the whole academic enterprise, sort of goes down the tube because you're rewarded for the quality of your ideas.
Swain says too many problems, from plagiarism to anti-Semitism, are taking place on college campuses today. And if higher education is going to succeed, she says universities need to clean up their act.
If they are rewarding us because of the quality of our minds and what we produce, then they need to protect intellectual property. As Christian universities, they were founded by people that wanted to promote the Christian worldview of the cause of faith, and they have lost their way.
While Swain misses the classroom and interacting with students, she still believes getting an education is the most important thing a young person can do.
It's so essential if you're going to be a productive citizen for you to have critical thinking skills. So I would like to see colleges and universities go back to being a marketplace for ideas and for them to have diversity of thought. I miss that. But right now, I'm very focused on what I believe God has called me to do. I believe He's given me a platform, and the world is my classroom.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Strong report from CBN's Wendy Griffith. We'll be right back with an encouraging word for your day. That's coming up next.
Introducing a brand new way to start your morning. Get your daily quick start from CBN News. A quick read on the important news of the day delivered right to your inbox. Stay current on breaking news, politics, and entertainment. Discover how God is moving around the world and here at home. Plus, get exclusive stories and daily scripture encouragement just for you. Stay informed. Go to quickstart.news and subscribe today.
Welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Happy Tuesday. Sometimes it doesn't always feel like a happy Tuesday. For me, at the start of the show, if you saw, I forgot the title of our Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, on television. Maybe you're carrying something similar, something heavy. Maybe it's something you've never even spoken out loud. But remember this, God already knows, and He's not afraid of your depth. Today's reading comes from Psalm 139, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. You were made on purpose, for a purpose, by a God who sees it all and still calls you wonderfully made." So today, be encouraged and trust in Him fully, even in the struggle, because the one who shaped your heart can handle what's in it. Thanks for watching this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our CBN News programming on the CBN News channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories that you've seen by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on all of our social media platforms. Join us next time.